Before you hear a single lesson, understand this. This is not meant for everyone. This is not for men who want comfort, applause, or excuses. This is for those who feel the weight of responsibility on their chest, who walk into rooms and feel eyes shift, who are expected to lead, decide, endure, and carry pressure without complaint. If you have ever been called intense, intimidating, or too much, not because you were loud but because you were solid, then this is for you. Most men are taught to chase dominance on the outside, control the room, control the narrative, control other people. They are told that strength means never bending, never pausing, never showing uncertainty. And so they harden themselves, sharpen their edges, and build an image that looks powerful but cracks under real pressure. They win battles and still feel restless. They command respect and still feel unsettled. They dominate and yet know quietly that something inside is not fully governed. This is where the conversation changes, not to make you smaller, but to make you unshakable. Not to strip you of ambition, but to refine it. Because real dominance is not proven in noise or aggression, but in composure when chaos presses in. It is not shown in how quickly you react, but in how deliberately you choose. Anyone can intimidate. Few can remain calm when provoked. Anyone can overpower. Few can control themselves when their ego is challenged. If you are honest, you know the moments that test you the most are not the obvious ones. They are the quiet ones. The insult you didn't respond to, the loss you didn't explain, the pressure you carried without recognition, the decision you made alone knowing it would not be celebrated. Those moments reveal who actually has command. This is not about becoming less masculine, less driven, or less dangerous. It is about becoming precise. About building a form of strength that does not leak under stress, does not collapse when attention fades, and does not depend on winning every exchange to feel whole. It is about standing so firmly within yourself that the world no longer dictates your state. So if you are ready to hear something that does not flatter you but fortifies you, if you are willing to look at dominance not as something you perform but something you embody, then stay here. Because what follows is not designed to motivate you for a moment. It is designed to reshape how you carry power for the rest of your life. I want to speak to those who wear the label of alpha male like armor, to those who dominate rooms with their posture, their voice, their will, to those who are used to winning, commanding, leading, and being obeyed. This is not a speech to flatter you, nor is it meant to tear you down for the sake of humility theater. This is a mirror. Stoicism teaches that the unexamined life is not merely foolish, it is dangerous. And the most dangerous man is not the weak one, but the strong one who does not understand his own weaknesses. The alpha male, in the modern sense, is celebrated as decisive, fearless, commanding, independent. He is praised for moving forward while others hesitate. He is admired for carrying pressure without complaint. He is respected for refusing to bend. And yet, Stoicism quietly asks a harder question. Is this strength, or is this simply unchallenged habit? Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, and still wrote to himself that true power lies in governing the self, not others. Epictetus, once a slave, reminded men that no one can dominate you unless you hand them your judgment. When you hear these words, you may feel a flicker of resistance. That resistance itself is worth studying. One weakness of the so-called alpha male is the addiction to control. Control feels like safety. Control feels like certainty. Control feels like dominance. But Stoicism warns us that the need to control what is not ours to control is the fastest path to inner slavery. When a man believes he must always be on top, always winning, always directing the outcome, he becomes fragile without realizing it. His peace depends on compliance. His confidence depends on applause. His identity depends on outcomes. Remove any of these, and what remains is not strength, but panic disguised as anger. Many dominating men believe they are unemotional because they do not cry, because they do not speak openly about fear or doubt. Stoicism never taught emotional suppression. It taught emotional discipline. There is a difference. Suppression is denial. Discipline is mastery. The alpha who suppresses emotion often mistakes numbness for strength. He tells himself he feels nothing, but his body keeps the score. The tension in his jaw, the tightness in his chest, the impatience with others, the sudden explosions of rage over small things. These are emotions that were never conquered, only buried alive. And buried things have a habit of returning with force. Another weakness lies in pride, especially the pride of self-image. The alpha male often invests heavily in how he is perceived. Respect, status, reputation, authority. These become currencies he trades in daily. Stoicism reminds us that reputation is an external, and externals are unstable by nature. When a man ties his worth to how others see him, he quietly hands strangers the power to disturb his inner state. A rumor, a challenge, a younger rival, a single moment of public failure can shake him more than he would ever admit. He may respond with domination, intimidation, or dismissal, but inside there is a wound. The Stoic asks, why should another man's opinion have the authority to rule my peace? Dominating personalities often struggle with listening. They hear words, but they listen only for confirmation or weakness. They interrupt, they correct, they instruct. Stoicism teaches that wisdom begins with listening, not to reply, but to understand. When you cannot listen, you cannot learn. When you cannot learn, you stagnate. And stagnation is decay wearing a confident mask. The world changes, people change, power dynamics shift. The man who believes he has nothing left to learn becomes obsolete while still breathing. There is also the weakness of isolation. Many alpha males stand alone not because they choose solitude, but because they have unknowingly trained others to keep their distance. Dominance without warmth creates obedience, not loyalty. Fear creates silence, not trust. Stoicism values self-sufficiency, but it does not deny human connection. Even the Stoic sage recognizes that we are social beings by nature. A man who cannot be vulnerable in any space, who cannot admit uncertainty, who cannot ask for help when needed, is not independent. He is imprisoned by his own image. Consider the fear of losing status. This fear drives many dominating men more than ambition itself. They may never name it, but it shapes their decisions. They overwork, not from purpose, but from anxiety. They compete even when there is nothing meaningful to gain. They compare constantly. Stoicism cuts through this by asking a brutal question: what is enough? If you cannot define enough, you will never have it. The alpha who cannot rest, who cannot step back without feeling diminished, is not powerful. He is being chased by an invisible master. Another weakness is impatience with weakness in others. The alpha male often prides himself on resilience, grit, and toughness. When others struggle, he may view them as inefficient, inferior, or burdensome. Stoicism teaches compassion not as sentimentality, but as understanding. Everyone is fighting a battle shaped by experiences you cannot see. When you despise weakness in others, it is often because you fear it in yourself. The Stoic does not mock the injured runner, he understands the terrain. Dominance can also distort one's relationship with time. Many alpha men live in constant urgency. Every moment must be optimized. Every delay feels like disrespect. Every obstacle feels personal. Stoicism reframes time as neutral. What happens when it happens is not an insult, it is reality. When a man is always rushing, always forcing, always pushing, he is not aligned with reason. He is reacting. And reaction is the opposite of mastery. Let us speak about anger, because it is often the most socially acceptable emotion for dominating men. Anger feels powerful. Anger creates movement. Anger intimidates. But Stoics warned repeatedly that anger is a temporary madness. Seneca wrote that anger, if not restrained, becomes more harmful than the injury that provoked it. The alpha male who relies on anger to assert control is borrowing energy at a high interest rate. It costs clarity. It costs judgment. It costs respect in the long run. The calm man who does not need to raise his voice often commands more authority than the one who shouts. There is also the weakness of over-identification with strength itself. Strength becomes the identity, not a tool. When injury, age, failure, or circumstance strips away that strength, the man feels hollow. Stoicism teaches adaptability. Strength today may be physical, tomorrow mental, later moral. The man who clings to one form of power will suffer when life inevitably demands another. Emotionally, many alpha males carry unspoken loneliness, surrounded by people yet unseen, respected yet not truly known. Stoicism does not ask you to broadcast your inner world, but it does ask you to be honest with yourself. If you cannot sit alone in silence without distraction, if stillness feels threatening, that is not dominance, that is avoidance. The Stoic trains himself to face his own thoughts without flinching. Perhaps the deepest weakness is the belief that dominance over others equals dominance over life. Life does not submit. It does not care about your posture, your titles, your victories. Illness comes, loss comes, betrayal comes, death comes. Stoicism prepares the man to meet these not with arrogance, but with steadiness. The alpha, who has never trained for loss, is shattered by it. The Stoic who has contemplated impermanence stands firm when the ground shakes. This speech is not an accusation, it is an invitation to refine dominance into mastery, to transform control into composure, to turn power outward into power inward. Imagine a man who does not need to prove he is alpha, because his presence is grounded, his words measured, his reactions deliberate. Imagine a man who can lead without shouting, correct without humiliating, win without gloating, lose without collapsing. This is not a weaker man. This is a rarer one. Stoicism does not strip you of ambition. It sharpens it. It does not make you passive. It makes you precise. It does not ask you to kneel. It asks you to stand without being shaken. If you are truly a dominating person, then the greatest territory left to conquer is not the room, not the competition, not the world, but the impulses that rise within you unannounced. The urge to react, the need to be seen, the fear of being surpassed, the hunger for validation. As long as these rule you, you are not free, and freedom, not dominance, is the highest form of power. The Stoics knew this long before the word alpha ever existed. They watched empires rise and fall, leaders praised and executed, heroes celebrated and forgotten. Through it all, they returned to the same truth. The man who cannot govern himself will never truly govern anything else. And yet, this understanding does not arrive all at once. It is forged slowly, through moments where your ego is challenged. And you choose restraint, through situations where you could dominate, but instead, you observe. Through losses that teach you more than victories ever did. It is in these moments that the rhythm of your life begins to change, where force gives way to focus, where noise gives way to clarity, where you start to realize that the strongest man in the room is often the one who does not feel the need to announce it, the one who can wait, the one who can endure silence without discomfort, the one who can hold his ground not by pushing forward, but by standing still while everything else moves around him. And in that stillness, there is a quiet authority forming, an authority that does not depend on fear or approval, an authority rooted in something far more difficult to achieve, something that most men spend their entire lives running from, because to reach it, you must first be willing to look directly at yourself when no one is watching. when there is nothing left to prove, and when the only voice left to answer is your own. That voice is rarely gentle at first. It does not flatter you. It does not congratulate you for past victories. It asks uncomfortable questions. Why did that insult stay with you all day? Why did you feel the need to crush instead of correct? Why did silence from others feel like disrespect? Why did you mistake obedience for loyalty again? A dominating man who refuses to answer these questions stays powerful on the surface and weak underneath. A dominating man who faces them begins a transformation most people will never witness. Stoicism demands responsibility without theatrics. No excuses, no dramatization, no victim stories hidden behind bravado. When something disturbs you, the Stoic does not immediately blame the world, the system, other people, or fate. He looks inward first, not to shame himself, but to locate the lever of control. If your mood depends on how others behave, you are not leading, you are reacting. If your confidence collapses when challenged, it was never solid to begin with. Dominance without emotional sovereignty is borrowed power. Many men who see themselves as alpha live in constant defense mode. They scan for threats, disrespect, competition. Every interaction becomes a test of hierarchy. This keeps the nervous system in a permanent state of readiness. It feels sharp, alert, alive, but over time it corrodes judgment. Stoicism teaches the power of selective engagement. Not every challenge deserves a response. Not every slight is an attack. Not every disagreement is a battle for rank. The man who responds to everything is controlled by everything. There is a particular weakness in needing to be right. Dominating personalities often equate being wrong with being diminished. They argue not to find truth, but to preserve authority. Stoicism dismantles this illusion. Being wrong is not a loss of power. Refusing to correct yourself is. A man who can say "I was wrong" without flinching gains credibility that no amount of posturing can replace. The crowd may fear the loud man, but they follow the honest one. Another blind spot is the relationship with pleasure and indulgence. Many alpha males preach discipline publicly and indulge privately. Excess food, excess sex, excess stimulation, excess validation. Stoicism calls this a fracture of character. You cannot command yourself only when others are watching. Self-mastery is what you do in private, when no reputation is at stake. If your discipline collapses the moment restraint becomes inconvenient, your authority is cosmetic. Let us talk about pain, because pain reveals more truth than success ever will. Dominating men often pride themselves on endurance, but they rarely examine how they relate to pain. Some ignore it, some numb it, some turn it outward as aggression. Stoicism teaches pain as information, not identity. Pain does not define you, but it does instruct you. The man who refuses to listen to pain repeats the same patterns until life forces the lesson harder. There is also the weakness of speed, fast decisions, fast judgments, fast reactions. Speed feels powerful. It creates momentum. But speed without clarity multiplies errors. The Stoic trains slowness where others rush. He pauses where others react. He lets emotions settle before acting. This does not make him weak, it makes him precise. The calm delay before action often determines whether a decision becomes a victory or a regret. Dominating people often struggle with forgiveness, not because they cannot forgive others, but because forgiveness feels like surrender. Stoicism reframes forgiveness as release, not concessio. N. Holding resentment is like gripping a blade and calling it strength. You are the one bleeding. Letting go does not absolve the offender, it frees your attention. And attention is one of the most valuable resources a powerful man possesses. There is a subtle weakness in the hunger for legacy. Many alpha males want to be remembered, admired, feared, talked about. Stoicism asks a colder question: remembered by whom? And for how long? Empires crumble, names fade, statues fall. When a man anchors his meaning to future recognition, he builds on unstable ground. The Stoic builds meaning in alignment with virtue, because virtue does not depend on witnesses. Consider how dominating men handle boredom. Boredom threatens the ego because it removes stimulation, challenge, and validation. Many fill it with noise, chaos, unnecessary conflict. Stoicism teaches contentment with simplicity. If you cannot be content without stimulation, you are not powerful, you are dependent. The man who can sit quietly, without reaching for distraction, holds a kind of dominance that cannot be taken away. Another weakness lies in comparison. Even the most confident alpha often measures himself against others, silently. Who is stronger, who earns more, who commands more attention? Stoicism exposes comparison as a trap. There will always be someone ahead in some metric. There will always be someone behind. Neither changes your obligation to act well. When you compete endlessly, you outsource your self-worth to a moving target. The dominating personality also tends to confuse pressure with purpose. Being busy feels meaningful. Carrying weight feels important. Stoicism asks whether the weight you carry is chosen or inherited from expectation. Not all pressure is noble. Not all sacrifice is wise. A man who never questions why he is striving may climb very high on the wrong wall. Emotionally, many alpha males struggle with tenderness. Tenderness feels risky. It exposes, it softens. Stoicism does not reject tenderness, it disciplines it. To be kind without being weak, to be compassionate without being naive, to care without losing control. These are not contradictions, they are refinements. The man who can show measured warmth commands deeper loyalty than the man who rules by intimidation. There is also the weakness of identity rigidity. This is who I am. I don't change. I don't bend. Stoicism teaches flexibility rooted in principle. Principles are firm. Strategies adapt. The man who refuses to evolve out of pride will eventually be outpaced by reality. Adaptation is not betrayal of self. It is survival with dignity. Dominating men often underestimate the power of example. They demand discipline but cut corners. They preach resilience but avoid discomfort. Stoicism insists that leadership is lived, not announced. People watch what you tolerate in yourself more than what you demand from others. Hypocrisy erodes authority silently, then all at once. There is a quiet weakness in needing to be needed. Being indispensable feels powerful. But when your sense of worth depends on others' dependence, you sabotage growth. Stoicism values contribution without attachment. Do your part fully, then let go. The man who hoards relevance becomes replaceable faster than the man who builds others up. Many dominating personalities fear stillness, because stillness removes the performance. In stillness, there is no audience, no hierarchy, no win or loss, just you. Stoicism trains stillness as a battlefield of its own. If you cannot face your thoughts without distraction, your dominance is performative. True command begins in silence. Let us speak about mortality, because nothing humbles dominance like the certainty of death. Stoicism does not use death to depress the mind, but to sharpen it. You will not always be strong. You will not always be feared. You will not always be relevant. Knowing this does not weaken ambition, it purifies it. What matters now becomes clearer. What does not matter loses its grip. The alpha male often avoids asking for help because help feels like weakness. Stoicism reframes help as strategy. No general wins wars alone. No ruler governs without counsel. Wisdom is recognizing when another perspective strengthens your position. Refusing help out of pride is not independence, it is inefficiency. There is also the weakness of unexamined success. Winning becomes routine. Victories pile up. The man stops asking what they cost him internally. Relationships thin. Peace erodes. Stoicism insists on periodic self-audit, not to self-criticize, but to recalibrate. Power without reflection decays into arrogance. Emotionally dominating men often carry guilt they never name. guilt for harsh words, for neglected relationships, for moments when ambition overrode humanity. Stoicism does not dwell on guilt, but it does not deny responsibility. Learn, correct, move forward. Carrying guilt without action is useless. Denying it is dishonest. Another weakness is the need for certainty. Dominating personalities want clear outcomes, clear hierarchies, clear rules. Stoicism accepts uncertainty as a constant. Control what you can, prepare for what you cannot. The man who needs certainty to act will freeze when the world becomes unpredictable. The Stoic moves forward with incomplete information and steady resolve. Dominance often masks fear of insignificance. The louder the display, the deeper the fear. Stoicism confronts insignificance directly. You are small in the scale of the universe, and that is freeing. When you stop trying to be everything, you can focus on being excellent in what is within your reach. There is strength in restraint that most people will never understand. The ability to walk away from provocation. The ability to remain calm when challenged. The ability to let others have the last word. These are not losses. They are strategic withdrawals that preserve energy for battles that matter. The Stoic form of dominance is quiet, grounded, unshakable. It does not announce itself. It does not chase validation. It does not panic under pressure. It is built through daily discipline, honest self-examination, and the courage to face internal weakness without excuses. Most men would rather dominate others than confront themselves, because the latter requires a level of honesty that no amount of physical or social power can replace. And so the question is not whether you are strong, feared, respected, or followed. The question is whether you are free from the need to prove, free from reactive emotion, free from dependence on outcomes, free from the opinions of those who do not govern your life. Until that freedom is earned, dominance remains conditional. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised clarity. They never promised admiration. They promised self-respect. The man who adopts this path does not become softer. He becomes sharper. He does not lose his edge. He learns where and when to use it. He understands that the greatest weakness of the alpha male is not arrogance, anger, or pride alone, but the refusal to outgrow the version of himself that once helped him survive, but now limits his command. And as you continue forward, as pressure increases and challenges evolve, you will notice a shift if you are paying attention. The need to dominate every room fades. The urge to react immediately loosens. The hunger for recognition quiets. In its place grows something heavier, calmer, more dangerous in its own way. A presence that does not rush, a will that does not crack under insult, a mind that observes before it moves. This is not the end of dominance. This is its refinement. And the men around you may not understand it at first, because it does not look like the loud version they are used to. But they will feel it, because when a man no longer needs to prove his strength, when his actions are deliberate and his emotions governed, when his sense of self is no longer tied to winning every exchange, there is an authority that settles into the space around him, an authority that does not demand attention yet commands it, an authority that continues to grow the more he resists the impulse to display it. And it is here, in this controlled fire, that the real test begins, because maintaining this level of internal command requires constant vigilance, constant honesty, and the willingness to face moments where the old instincts resurface, moments when dominance wants to become aggression again, moments when silence feels like weakness, moments when restraint feels like loss. And it is in those moments, not in the victories, not in the applause, not in the conquests, that the true measure of the man is revealed, because every day presents a choice between reacting, as you always have, or responding as the man you are becoming, and that choice never announces itself. It arrives quietly, in ordinary situations, in conversations, in setbacks, in private decisions, where no one is watching, where no reputation is at risk. and where the direction you choose continues to shape the kind of power you are actually building. Because power that is not maintained internally begins to leak outward in subtle ways. You notice it first in impatience, then in irritation, then in the need to remind people who you are, what you've done, what you're capable of. The Stoic sees these signs early and treats them like warning lights, not insults. When you feel the urge to assert yourself unnecessarily, it is not because others forgot your strength. It is because you momentarily forgot your center. Dominance that relies on repetition is already weakening. A truly grounded man does not need to restate his position. His consistency speaks for him. His boundaries are felt before they are explained. Stoicism trains this consistency through alignment between thought, word, and action. When these three drift apart, internal friction begins. That friction shows up as stress, irritability, and eventually burnout. The alpha male who ignores this believes he is just pushing harder. In reality, he is grinding himself down. There is a harsh truth few dominate. Men want to hear, not every battle proves your strength, and some battles expose your lack of it. When you cannot tolerate disrespect, disagreement, or delay, you reveal that your authority depends on immediate compliance. Stoicism teaches delayed power, the kind that waits, the kind that observes, the kind that acts only when action is clean and necessary. This restraint confuses people who expect dominance to be loud. Confusion, when combined with calm, creates psychological advantage. Another weakness hides in storytelling. Dominating men often narrate their lives as a series of wins and losses, enemies and victories. Stoicism strips away the drama. Events are neutral. Your judgment gives them weight. When you dramatize everything, you exhaust yourself and those around you. The Stoic simplifies. He asks, what is required now? Not what does this mean about me? Not how does this affect my image? But what action aligns with reason and character? Many alpha males struggle with delegation. They either micromanage because they don't trust others, or they abdicate because they don't want to be bothered. Stoicism favors deliberate delegation. Teach clearly, set standards, then release control. Trust is not blindness, it is calculated risk. A man who must touch everything proves he is overwhelmed, not essential. There is also the weakness of nostalgia. Dominating personalities often cling to past versions of themselves. When I was stronger, when I was feared more, when things were simpler. Stoicism respects the past, but does not live there. The past is instruction, not identity. A man who defines himself by who he was stops becoming who he could be. Emotionally, many alpha males confuse calmness with coldness. They withdraw instead of regulate. Stoicism is not emotional withdrawal, it is emotional clarity. You feel fully, but you do not obey blindly. You acknowledge fear without letting it steer. You recognize desire without becoming its servant. This requires courage that no audience ever applauds. There is a dangerous comfort in being dominant all the time. People stop challenging you honestly. They tell you what you want to hear. They hide their doubts. Over time, you lose accurate feedback. Stoicism teaches you to seek discomfort voluntarily, invite critique, test your assumptions. The man who insulates himself from friction becomes brittle. Another weakness is moral laziness. Success can dull ethical edges. Small compromises become habits. Habits become character. Stoicism insists that virtue is not situational. How you act when no one benefits is who you are. Power does not excuse decay, it accelerates its consequences. Dominating men often underestimate the cost of intimidation. Fear produces short-term compliance and long-term resentment. Stoicism understands human nature well enough to know that resentment never disappears, it waits. Loyalty, once broken, rarely returns in its original form. The Stoic leader values respect over fear because respect survives absence. There is also the weakness of over-identifying with outcomes. Win, and you feel invincible. Lose, and you feel diminished. Stoicism detaches identity from results. You control effort, intention, and conduct. Results follow probabilities, not ego. When you detach, you become harder to manipulate, harder to destabilize. The alpha male often prides himself on being decisive, but decisiveness without reflection becomes recklessness. Stoicism balances courage with prudence. Acting fast is easy. Acting right is harder. Acting right under pressure is rare. That rarity is where true dominance lives. Consider how you handle being ignored, not opposed, not challenged, ignored. For many dominating men, this is intolerable. It feels like erasure. Stoicism teaches indifference to indifference. You do not exist to be acknowledged. You exist to act in accordance with your values. When attention becomes optional, freedom increases. Another weakness is the inability to rest without guilt. Rest feels like falling behind. Stoicism reframes rest as maintenance. A weapon that is never cleaned fails. A mind that never rests fractures. Discipline includes knowing when to stop. Dominance can also distort intimacy. Relationships become transactional. Affection becomes conditional. Stoicism reminds you that closeness does not weaken authority when it is grounded in self-respect. The man who can be firm and humane earns devotion that cannot be commanded. There is a particular danger in believing your own myth, the stories others tell about you, the reputation that precedes you. Stoicism cuts through myth with daily practice. Who are you when you wake up tired? When plans fail? When no one notices? That is the man you must train, because that man is always there. Dominating men often chase intensity instead of depth. High stakes, high pressure, high drama. Stoicism favors depth, repetition, mastery of fundamentals. Intensity burns fast. Depth lasts. Another weakness is the refusal to grieve. Losses are minimized. Pain is postponed. Stoicism does not deny grief. It contextualizes it. You grieve fully, then you move forward without letting grief define you. Suppressed grief leaks out as bitterness. There is strength in admitting limits, not publicly for applause but privately for clarity. You cannot do everything. You cannot control everyone. Stoicism treats limits as guides, not insults. Within limits, excellence is possible. Dominating men often struggle with patience for process. They want outcomes now. Stoicism honors process as the only path to sustainable power. Shortcuts create fragility. Process builds resilience. The need to be exceptional can become a weakness when it isolates you from ordinary humanity. Stoicism reminds you that you are not exempt from nature. Hunger, fatigue, fear, aging apply to you too. Accepting this does not lower you, it grounds you. There is also the weakness of overconfidence in willpower. Willpower is finite. Stoicism builds systems, habits, and environments that support virtue without constant strain. A man who relies only on force of will eventually fail when tired, stressed, or distracted. Dominance often comes with a blind spot for gratitude. Gratitude feels soft. Stoicism sees it as realism. You did not build everything alone. Recognizing this does not diminish your effort, it sharpens your perspective. Many alpha males fear being replaceable. Stoicism dissolves this fear by shifting focus from uniqueness to integrity. You may be replaced in function, but not in character. Character is not transferable. Another weakness is impatience with slow learners. Stoicism teaches that teaching reinforces mastery. If you cannot explain patiently, you do not understand as deep. Lie as you think. Dominating personalities often equate silence with loss. Stoicism teaches strategic silence. Silence that lets others reveal themselves. Silence that preserves energy. Silence that speaks louder than reaction. There is danger in equating hardness with strength. Hardness cracks. Resilience bends and returns. Stoicism cultivates resilience through acceptance of reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Power reveals character more than it creates it. Stoicism prepares you for power by refining character before circumstances test it. The man who waits to develop discipline after success is already late, and as you continue refining this inner command, you will notice fewer emotional spikes, fewer compulsive reactions, fewer moments where you feel pulled instead of directed. You will begin to choose responses instead of being dragged by impulses. Others may misinterpret this calm as detachment or arrogance. Let them. Your work is not to manage perceptions, but to maintain alignment. The old version of dominance will still tempt you. The quick assertion, the sharp word, the visible win. Sometimes it will even work, but you will feel the difference immediately. One path leaves you depleted, the other leaves you steady. Over time, you will trust the steadier path more, not because it looks impressive, but because it keeps you intact. This is the discipline most men avoid, because it offers no applause, no shortcuts, no external trophies. It demands daily attention, internal honesty, and the humility to correct course without ceremony. It strips dominance of theatrics and leaves behind something heavier, quieter, more enduring. And as days turn into years, this way of being begins to shape how you walk into rooms, how you speak, how you listen, how you decide. People will sense that you are not rushed, not needy, not easily provoked. Some will feel uneasy around you without knowing why. Others will feel safe. Both reactions are signs that your presence is no longer trying to dominate the space, but stabilize it. The greatest shift happens when you realize you no longer need to be the sharpest object in every encounter. You can allow others to shine without feeling diminished. You can step back without losing ground. You can let go without falling behind. This does not make you smaller. It makes your power less visible and more absolute. And still, the work never ends. Each day presents new chances to slip back into old habits, to confuse control with strength, to mistake reaction for leadership. Stoicism does not promise arrival, it promises direction. You walk it as long as you live. The man who embraces this path does not announce it. He lives it quietly, relentlessly, in choices no one applauds. He becomes harder to manipulate, harder to destabilize, harder to corrupt. He carries himself with a weight that does not come from fear or force, but from coherence. And in moments when chaos presses in, when others look for someone to blame or something to dominate, you will feel the difference between the man you were trained to be and the man you are training yourself to become. And in that moment, when the old instinct urges you to react and the new discipline urges you to pause, when the room waits and the pressure rises, when there is no script and no guarantee, you will recognize that this is where dominance is no longer about others at all, but about whether you will choose the harder restraint over the easier display, whether you will hold the line internally even if it costs you externally, whether you will remain grounded when everything invites you to perform. And that decision, made again and again in silence, continues to shape a form of power that does not peak quickly or fade loudly, but deepens slowly, steadily, as long as you are willing to stay awake to it. Because staying awake to it is not dramatic, it is demanding. It requires you to notice the smallest shifts inside yourself, the subtle return of old habits wearing new disguises, the urge to interrupt, the impulse to assert, the quiet irritation when someone moves slower than you think they should. Stoicism does not ask you to eliminate these impulses. It asks you to recognize them without obeying them. That gap between impulse and action is where dominance matures. Many men believe dominance is about imposing will, The Stoic understands it is about directing will. When you impose, you meet resistance. When you direct, you move through reality instead of against it. Water does not argue with stone, it shapes it over time. This is not softness, this is inevitability. You begin to see how much energy you once wasted proving yourself, proving intelligence, proving toughness, proving leadership. Stoicism exposes proof-seeking as insecurity dressed in confidence. When you no longer need to prove, you conserve an immense amount of psychological energy. That energy becomes focus. Focus becomes clarity. Clarity becomes leverage. Dominating men often underestimate how much noise they carry inside. Thoughts racing, judgment, stacking, scenarios playing out. Stoicism trains mental order. One thought at a time, one action at a time. Chaos inside always leaks outside. Order inside creates presence that others feel immediately, even if they cannot explain it. There is a kind of dominance that comes from predictability, not in behavior, but in values. People know where you stand. They know what you tolerate. They know what you don't. Stoicism sharpens this edge. You are not reactive, but you are consistent. Consistency builds trust. Trust multiplies influence. Another weakness many alpha males carry is contempt. Contempt for inefficiency. Contempt for emotional people. Contempt for those who complain. Stoicism warns that contempt corrodes judgment. It blinds you to useful information. It isolates you. The Stoic does not excuse weakness, but he does not despise it either. He observes it, understands it, and acts accordingly. You also begin to see how often dominance is confused with volume. Louder voices, bigger gestures, stronger language. Stoicism strips dominance of theatrics. The quiet sentence spoken at the right moment carries more weight than a speech fueled by emotion. Precision outperforms intensity. There is a dangerous satisfaction in being feared. Fear feels like control, but fear expires quickly. Once it fades, it turns into defiance or resentment. Stoicism builds something slower but stronger. Respect rooted in reliability. Authority grounded in fairness. These survive absence. The alpha male often wants immediate resolution. Close the deal, end the conflict, win the exchange. Stoicism tolerates unresolved tension when resolution would compromise principle. Not everything needs to be settled now. Patience is not indecision. It is confidence that time can work in your favor. Another subtle weakness is the inability to celebrate others without comparison. Praise feels like subtraction. Stoicism dissolves this scarcity mindset. Another man's success does not diminish yours unless your identity is fragile. When you are secure, you can acknowledge strength without feeling threatened. Dominating men often push themselves past exhaustion and call it discipline. Stoicism distinguishes between discipline and self-neglect. Burning yourself out does not prove strength. It proves poor stewardship. You are a resource. Resources must be managed. There is power in knowing when not to speak. Silence can be a boundary. Silence can be refusal. Silence can be strategy. Stoicism trains silence not as avoidance, but as control. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. You may notice that as you internalize this discipline, fewer things offend you, not because you are numb, but because you are selective. Offense requires participation. You stop volunteering your peace. Dominance without self-knowledge eventually turns inward. Anger becomes self-criticism. Pressure becomes anxiety. Stoicism interrupts this cycle by grounding identity in action, not emotion. You are what you repeatedly choose, not what you momentarily feel. Another weakness lies in mistaking confidence for certainty. Stoicism embraces probability. You act decisively while accepting uncertainty. This keeps arrogance in check and adaptability intact. The need to be admired can quietly dictate behavior. Stoicism asks you to act as if no one is watching. This thought is liberating and terrifying. Without witnesses, excuses disappear. Integrity becomes visible. Dominating men often resist changing their minds publicly. It feels like loss of authority. Stoicism reframes it as demonstration of authority. The man who updates his thinking models strength, not weakness. There is a particular discipline in enduring misunderstanding. People will misread your restraint as disinterest, your calm as arrogance, your silence as weakness. Stoicism trains you to tolerate misinterpretation without rushing to correct it. Clarity emerges over time through consistency. You begin to value depth over speed in relationships. Fewer words, clearer expectations. Stoicism favors quality of connection over quantity of influence. The alpha male often fears irrelevance. Stoicism dissolves this fear by anchoring value internally. You are relevant as long as you live according to principle. External relevance comes and goes. Another weakness is overexposure, saying too much, explaining too much, justifying too much. Stoicism favors economy. Do what is required, say what is necessary, let results speak. You learn to distinguish urgency from importance. Many things feel urgent, few are important. Stoicism trains prioritization rooted in values, not pressure. Dominating men often chase respect but forget trust. Trust is built slowly through reliability. Stoicism values promises kept over impressions made. There is strength in allowing discomfort without immediately fixing it. Stoicism teaches you to sit with unease long enough to understand it. Avoidance delays growth. You also begin to see how dominance can mask fear of intimacy. Control feels safer than closeness. Stoicism does not force intimacy, but it does not fear it either. You choose connection deliberately, not compulsively. Another weakness is the tendency to see life as competition only. Stoicism recognizes cooperation as leverage. Not every situation requires a winner and a loser. The disciplined man does not confuse calm with passivity. He is ready to act when action aligns with reason. When he acts, it is decisive because it is rare. You may notice fewer emotional highs and lows, not dullness but steadiness. Stoicism smooths extremes without flattening meaning. Dominating personalities often underestimate the impact of small habits. Stoicism emphasizes daily practice over dramatic change. Small corrections compound. There is also the discipline of letting go of what no longer serves you. Old grudges, old identities, old narratives. Stoicism treats attachment as optional. You learn to accept praise without needing it and criticism without fearing it. Both become information, not identity. Dominance rooted in Stoicism does not seek to be intimidating. It seeks to be unmovable. Others adjust themselves around you because you do not adjust your principles around them. The more you practice this, the less reactive your life becomes. Fewer emergencies, fewer regrets, more deliberate movement. You begin to see that many conflicts you once engaged in were unnecessary. They fed the ego, not the mission. Stoicism sharpens your sense of timing, knowing when to push, when to wait, when to withdraw. The alpha male often wants to be exceptional. Stoicism aims for excellence. Excellence is quieter, more sustainable. You start to respect limits, including your own. Limits guide focus. Focus multiplies impact. There is a calm confidence that comes from knowing you can endure discomfort without collapsing or lashing out. This confidence is not loud. As this way of being deepens, others may project onto you strength, coldness, authority, distance. Let them. Your work is internal alignment. The man who practices this does not become untouchable. He becomes less vulnerable to manipulation. There is a difference. You stop chasing certainty and start building resilience. Whatever happens, you respond, not react. And as this continues, day after day, decision after decision, the shape of your dominance changes again. It becomes less visible but more effective, less about asserting presence and more about shaping outcomes, less about winning moments and more about sustaining direction. You notice that even when situations escalate around you, there is a part of you that remains still, watching, calculating, choosing, and that stillness becomes familiar, dependable, something you can return to under pressure, something that does not depend on praise or fear, something that holds when emotions surge and circumstances tighten. And in that space, where reaction once lived, there is now room for judgment, for patience, for deliberate action, and you realize that this is not an endpoint but a posture, one that must be renewed daily, quietly, without ceremony. As long as you continue to move through a world that will always test whether your dominance is rooted in impulse or discipline, whether your strength is reactive or composed, whether you will continue to choose the harder control over the easier display again and again, in moments that look ordinary from the outside, but carry weight inside, moments where the real work continues. And the real work is rarely dramatic. It does not announce itself with triumph or catastrophe. It shows up in restraint when provocation would be easier. It shows up in patience when speed would feel powerful. It shows up in consistency when novelty would be more exciting. The Stoic understands that mastery is maintained, not achieved. You don't arrive at dominance and stay there. You earn it repeatedly through choice. There will be days when the old instincts feel sharper than ever, days when disrespect feels louder, when obstacles feel personal, when your tolerance thins. Stoicism does not promise that these days disappear. It promises that you meet them differently. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What does this require of me?" That shift alone changes everything. Dominating men often measure progress by external markers, more authority, more leverage, more recognition. Stoicism measures progress internally, fewer emotional hijacks, faster recovery from disturbance, cleaner decisions under pressure. These victories are invisible, but they compound faster than any public success. You begin to see how often people mistake force for certainty. They push harder when unsure. They dominate louder when insecure. The Stoic moves with quiet assurance because his certainty is internal. He knows what he will and will not do regardless of circumstance. This makes him predictable in principle and unpredictable in tactic. Another weakness that fades over time is the need to rush closure. You stop forcing outcomes just to relieve discomfort. Uncertainty no longer threatens your identity. You allow situations to mature. Many problems resolve themselves when not interfered with by ego. Dominance grounded in Stoicism also reshapes how you handle praise. Compliments no longer inflate you. They pass through without sticking. You acknowledge them without needing to build an identity around them. This keeps you agile. Inflated egos move slowly and fall hard. Criticism, too, loses its sting. Not because you dismiss it, but because you dissect it. Is there truth here? If yes, you correct. If no, you discard. Either way, your equilibrium remains intact. Emotional stability becomes a form of authority others rely on. You start noticing how much of human conflict is fueled by unexamined fear. Fear of being diminished, fear of losing control, fear of appearing weak. Stoicism confronts fear directly by shrinking it to size. Fear is information, not instruction. The dominating man who integrates this stops overreacting to minor slights. He no longer interprets inconvenience as disrespect. He understands that most people are absorbed in their own concerns. This perspective alone dissolves countless unnecessary conflicts. There is also a shift in how you handle ambition. Ambition becomes disciplined instead of frantic. You still aim high, but you are no longer frantic about arrival. You work steadily, relentlessly, without emotional spikes tied to progress or delay. Stoicism teaches you to build strength that survives boredom. Anyone can perform under adrenaline. Few can maintain excellence in monotony. Monotony is where character is forged. You begin to see dominance not as something to assert, but as something that emerges when you are unshakable. Others sense that you cannot be rushed, bullied, or emotionally cornered. This makes them adjust their behavior without you demanding it. Another weakness that dissolves is the urge to control narratives. You stop correcting misunderstandings that time will clarify. You stop defending yourself against every accusation. You let reality do the work. Dominating men often fear appearing ordinary. Stoicism frees you from this fear. Ordinary actions done with discipline produce extraordinary stability. Stability outlasts spectacle. You also become more deliberate with anger. You no longer let it spill. When anger appears, you examine it. Is it signaling a boundary, a value, or wounded pride? Most anger fades under examination. What remains is clarity. The Stoic does not eliminate desire, he refines it. Desire becomes intention. Intention becomes action. Action becomes habit. Habit becomes character. You start recognizing the cost of unnecessary confrontation. Energy saved becomes focus redirected. Focus redirected becomes leverage. Another weakness of dominating personalities is impatience with ambiguity in people. You want clear allies and enemies. Stoicism teaches that people are complex, inconsistent, and evolving. You stop demanding purity and start managing reality. As this mindset deepens, you also become harder to flatter. Praise no longer buys influence. This makes you less manipulable. Those who rely on charm lose their leverage. Dominance rooted in Stoicism also sharpens ethical clarity. You stop compromising values for convenience. Compromise always returns with interest. You begin to feel less compelled to fill silence. Silence becomes a tool. It draws info. Armation. It shifts pressure. It centers you. The need to be impressive fades. The need to be effective remains. Effectiveness often looks boring from the outside. You also notice a change in how you carry yourself physically. Less tension. Fewer sharp movements. Presence becomes grounded. People feel it before they understand it. Another weakness that disappears is the urge to retaliate immediately. You learn that retaliation is often predictable and therefore weak. Strategic restraint unsettles more than aggression. Stoicism also reshapes your relationship with success. Success becomes a byproduct, not a pursuit. You focus on execution. Outcomes follow. You start valuing preparation over performance. Performance fluctuates. Preparation endures. Dominating men often ignore small fractures until they become breaks. Stoicism encourages constant maintenance. Minor adjustments prevent major failures. There is also a deeper emotional shift. You stop needing constant stimulation to feel alive. Stillness becomes sufficient. This is rare power. You begin to recognize that many people are ruled by impulse. This awareness gives you advantage. You wait. They reveal themselves. The Stoic does not rush to judgment. He gathers information. Judgment without data is ego, not intelligence. You stop seeing discipline as restriction and start seeing it as liberation. Discipline frees you from mood, from impulse, from regret. Dominance becomes less about asserting superiority and more about embodying reliability. People trust what is reliable. You also learn to separate identity from role. Roles change. Identity anchored in principle remains. The fear of failure loses its grip. Failure becomes feedback. Feedback becomes refinement. You stop outsourcing motivation to emotion. You act regardless of feeling. This makes you dependable to yourself. Another weakness that fades is defensiveness. Defensiveness signals insecurity. Security listens. You also learn to pace yourself. Not every moment requires maximum output. Sustainability becomes a priority. Stoicism does not dull ambition, it sharpens patience. You begin to understand why so few men reach this level of internal command. It requires sacrificing ego rewards. It requires tolerating misunderstanding. It requires choosing long-term composure over short-term dominance. As this way of being settles in, you may notice fewer external wins at first. You are no longer chasing every opportunity. You are selecting. Over time, the wins that matter accumulate. People may test you more at first. Calm invites challenge. Stay steady. Consistency trains others how to treat you. You also learn to let go of unnecessary roles. You are not responsible for managing everyone's emotions. You are responsible for your conduct. Another weakness that dissolves is the urge to be indispensable. You build systems that function without you. This is real leadership. Stoicism also changes how you experience adversity. Adversity becomes training. Resistance becomes feedback. You stop romanticizing struggle. You endure it without dramatization. Dominance becomes quiet confidence, not loud assertion. You begin to trust process over impulse. You realize that many people confuse intensity with importance. You do not. The need to be seen fades. The need to be aligned remains. You also notice how rarely you regret restraint compared to reaction. Regret becomes a teacher you consult less often. The Stoic form of dominance is cumulative. Each day of restraint adds weight. Each day of clarity adds leverage. You stop reacting to every provocation as if it defines you. Identity becomes stable. You begin to see how much freedom exists in not caring about trivial judgments. As this continues, you may find yourself standing in situations that once would have triggered you, and nothing happens inside. No surge, no need to assert, just awareness. This is not emptiness, this is control. Others may interpret this as distance. Let them. Distance from chaos is not coldness, it is discipline. You also become more selective with commitments. Saying no becomes easier. Boundaries sharpen. Stoicism teaches that saying no preserves energy for what matters. Dominating men often overcommit to prove capacity. Stoicism favors precision. You stop carrying unnecessary burdens. You ask, is this mine to carry? You also learn to recover faster. Emotional recovery becomes a skill. You stop narrating every challenge as a test of manhood. Challenges become tasks. You begin to sense when to step forward and when to step back. Timing becomes intuitive. Dominance becomes situational, not constant. You also learn to respect reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. The Stoic does not argue with reality. He adapts. As this posture deepens, you notice fewer internal conflicts. Decisions align with values. This reduces friction. You stop needing external validation to confirm internal certainty. You also become more dangerous in a quiet way. Not because you are aggressive, but because you are composed. Composed men are unpredictable to reactive ones. You understand that the greatest leverage is self-command, and so the work continues, quietly, relentlessly, in moments that will never be applauded, in decisions that feel small but compound into stability, in restraint that no one sees but you, in clarity that cuts through noise without announcing itself, in discipline that does not shout but endures. And as you continue moving forward with this posture, there is no final arrival, no ceremony, no declaration that the work is done, only the ongoing choice to remain aligned when misalignment would be easier, to remain grounded when reaction would be faster, to remain composed when assertion would be tempting. And in that ongoing choice, repeated without drama, without witnesses, without reward, the shape of your dominance continues to evolve, deepen, and solidify in ways that are not immediately visible, but unmistakably felt. So understand this clearly. The highest form of dominance is not loud, not theatrical, not desperate to be seen. It is the kind of power that remains standing when everything external is stripped away. It is the man who cannot be provoked into foolishness, cannot be baited into reaction, cannot be shaken out of alignment. While others chase control, he governs himself. While others demand respect, he embodies it. While others burn themselves out trying to dominate the moment, he outlasts them by mastering time, impulse, and emotion. This is not softness. This is supremacy of character. And once you reach this level, you no longer need to prove who you are, because every room you enter adjusts to you, every challenge sharpens you instead of breaking you, and every test reveals the same truth again and again, that the strongest man is not the one who overpowers others, but the one who has absolute command over himself, and never gives that power away.